concert that I know of here in the reading room. And this crazy idea began, well, actually, it began in 1998. We had the extraordinary opportunity to purchase a part of a collection of Alan Tyson, who was an eminent British musicologist, and we were able to purchase a large number of Mozart and Beethoven first and early editions at that time. And that started or spurred us on to make occasional additions to that collection. And together with Dr. Hugh Macdonald, we bit by bit, piece by piece, added music to the collection. And a year ago, I saw a listing for string quartet parts of Mozart opera arrangements. And I was razzing Beth Macdonald, the director of strings. I said, if I buy them, will you use them? And so we started this sort of banter back and forth. And the idea that was hatched was that we would have a concert here in Gaylord, but the kids have done all their rehearsing using scans that we created from the staff here in the library. But during the rehearsal, or during the performance tonight, I wanted them to use the actual scores printed in 1796. And so the idea was to literally bring it to life, and that we had all these silly kind of analogies of being in the audience at an opera and wanting to stand up and sing along with people, and the thought was, well, the extension is, of course, to go into a library or a museum, pull something off the wall or whatever out of the exhibit and use it. And I understand that it would be wonderful if I had a violin for you to use this evening. But unfortunately we don't. But we do have music. So I'm going to go get the music. Yes. In our highly secure cabinets. Yeah, so this is what it's like to be Mozart's orchestral librarian. So, at this point, to talk a little bit about why these arrangements came into existence, what their purpose was, and is still to us today, I've invited this evening Dr. Hugh Macdonald to talk a little bit about opera in arrangement and these particular scores in specific. So, Dr. Macdonald.
Thank you, Brad. This is just a grand idea to play music from the parts in the sort of conditions in which they were originally intended. The collection is really magnificent. I mean, all good libraries have good special collections, and this library has a really splendid special collection, of which, of course, the Mozart and Beethoven collections is only a part. But thanks to Brad's determined work, we've been able to increase step by step, and so that really the works of Mozart and Beethoven in particular are very, very well represented. What it gives us a chance to do is to understand how music was circulated in this time, because in Mozart's time, not everything he played or composed was published then and there. And when things were published, they were usually published in a set of parts, like quartets, not in score. And the same would apply to, say, an opera or symphony. You might put out scores. The publisher would put out a score, but he wouldn't put out a set of parts, but not a score for many years later. And since Mozart became popular mostly after his death rather than during his lifetime, there was a flurry of publishers in the 1790s putting out anything they could find of Mozart, and many of his pieces, and the operas in particular, exist in all sorts of different forms. not just, the one form that really took a long time to appear was the full score of the opera, which we would regard as the definitive text. What they would publish would be various kinds of piano score, piano vocal selections, and piano arrangements for flute, duet arrangements for bassoon and harp arrangements, for anything under the sun. And if you consult the famous Kirtle catalogue, you'll see how pretty well every Mozart piece existed in a sort of user-friendly form for whatever use you might need. An example I often go to is the Beethoven septet, which was written about 1800 and was an immensely popular work. Now that's hard to understand because in present day we would find it very hard to put a septet together, strings and winds, and to play this thing. But the reason it was so popular is you could buy it in almost any form you like, as a piano solo, piano duet, as an arrangement for clarinet and cello or whatever. And these things came out, and so it's the people are familiar with music, not usually in its original form. This is hard for us to understand because we tend to listen to pretty well everything now in its correct lineup. And in case of opera is particularly good. I hope you'll take a moment before we leave to look at the exhibition which Brad has put out in the display cases. There's a case devoted to the marriage of Figaro, one to Clemenza di Tito, and one to Così fan tutte. Now the value of playing from parts such as this is that you learn how difficult life was for instrumentalists. The paper was expensive, and so there's a tendency for as much to be crammed onto the page as possible. They didn't tend to think about spacing it nicely and having good page turns convenient. There are no rehearsal letters. There are no bar numbers. It's a mystery how people rehearsed and played music before about 1850, even then. They didn't have pencils. Pencils, I mean, you're never allowed to go to rehearse without a pencil, is that right? But in the 18th century, it seems that they never wrote anything in, so that they either knew exactly what to do from the notation, or the conductor, if there was one, never told them anything. And the issue which has interested me for many years is repeats, because lots of music repeats. And in modern performance, we always have to decide whether to repeat or not. They either always repeat it or never repeat it, because you never see anything written on the parts. In fact, the parts that survive from the 18th century are very rarely marked with anything at all. But they're printed on beautiful paper. It's soft to the touch, and it lasts. It won't fade away like many modern publications, which is a good reason why a collection of this kind is something to treasure, because it'll always be with us. We're going to hear some bits of Così fan tutte. I was just going to show you that as you'll see from the exhibition, this is a vocal score of Così fan tutte, but it isn't really a vocal score because it's only got the songs in it. Each one is starts again in a new place with its own title page, and no recitatives in between. So nobody cares about the story. They just love the songs. And so you could take this home and you could sing it, or you could imagine singing it, or you could make your own arrangement or play it on the piano or something. Or you go to the opera if it's performed, but of course these things are not always performed. And Così fan tutte was quite soon after it was popular to start with, but was then regarded by Beethoven especially as somewhat immoral. The story, as you probably know, Così fan tutte, is a beautifully manufactured intrigue of two sisters who are in love with two gentlemen, and the gentlemen undertake a bet with a so-called philosopher friend that their lady friends are true. And so to test them, and it's a kind of cruel trick, they pretend that they have to go away, called away on military service, and they disappear. And the girls, two girls, are heartbroken. And they come back disguised as Albanians, and they pay court to the other girl. And of course, the poor girls themselves, by the end of Act 1, they're already kind of falling. And it takes the whole of Act 2 to bring them around to get to the point where they're about to sign and seal their with the wrong guy, the wrong man. And it only gets explained at the very end. And in fact, it never is explained. In the opera itself, it's never clear whether they return to their former lovers or to their new lovers. So every production you see, this is what you're waiting to find out. Yeah. You wonder why I'm waving this around. Because the fact is it's mine, and it's not. it's an edition from 1810, but after today it will belong to Gaylord Library, because I'm very happy to contribute. Now we're going to hear four extracts from the Così fan tutte, beginning with the overture, which includes the sort of motto theme, Così fan tutte, comes at the beginning and the end. But otherwise, it's one of these wonderful, frothy opera buffa overtures, which goes at I say, tremendous speed. This quartet, incidentally, is pride and joy of Beth's chamber class, having been, I think you're all seniors, you're all graduating. We've been together since you arrived. Loyalty, devotion, dedication, unsurpassed. Overture to Così fan tutte. reflecting this morning at the symphony downtown that some traditions have got stuck with us, and one of them is that in the 18th century, for say an orchestral piece, you'd have the parts copied by hand. In order, if Mozart had a concert to give, he'd send it to a copyist, which means that it's very expensive to, when you have a chorus or a large body of strings, you have to share as much as possible. You can't have a copy for everybody. And string players learnt to share two to a stand, two to a desk, which is still with us today. Mm-hmm. It's quite extraordinary. It doesn't have to be. But that's one of those things which is stuck. Oboes and flute players, of course, have to have their own music because they have their own parts. Anyway, we're now going on to a duet for the two sisters very early in the opera, where they're both attempting to reassure each other of their lifelong devotion. few sort of trumpets and drums, and off they go. Having sung a very beautiful quintet, so that the two men go, leaving the two girls and the philosopher, and they stand there and watch their ship sail away. So this is sort of water music. You can hear the gentle movement of the waves running through this. It's really very beautiful farewell. They're, of course, heartbroken. Alfonso is tickled to death. He thinks this is but he's faking his sorrow. Mozart doesn't know how to fake, so it sounds as though they all feel the same way. This is the Zeta, the trio. It's not stated on the music, we've no idea who it is, but he does a beautiful job, it seems to me, and to have more Mozart quartets is always pretty welcome. A lot of people who would have played this in 1796 would never have been near the opera, wouldn't have any idea what it was about, but they just thought, my goodness, this is beautiful music, let's just treat it as a string quartet, which is what we're doing tonight. Well, the gentlemen come back in disguise, and they start making inappropriate advances. But one of the ladies, Fiordiligi, is determined not to give in to her distant lover, to betray her distant lover. And she sings a famous aria, Come Scoglio, which is particularly notable for huge leaps for the soprano. She has to have a range of several octaves. But it works pretty well in the string quartet, I think. You'll see. This is a virtuoso piece, and it's our last extract for this evening.
Thank you.